The Olympic Games are traced back to a time earlier than the human race. The story being that Kronos and Zeus wrestled there, and that the Curetes were the first to race at Olympia. Hi, hello, welcome. This is Let's Talk About Myths, baby, Olympics edition. I'm your host, Liv, a woman who doesn't particularly care about the modern Olympics, but absolutely cares about the ancient ones. And so this week, I've made a little last-minute change to our schedule. This week was meant to be this year's summer Q&A episodes, but then it was pointed out to me that the Olympics are happening and they're ancient as shit, and I should probably talk about them. That's how I took it, at least. Really, my friend just messaged me a while ago to chat about the ancient Olympics, and I said, oh my god, that's such a good idea. And then I just forgot that I'd planned to air that episode this week. And so here we are. On Friday's episode, I will be speaking with returning guest Alexandra Sills, who you should absolutely remember from the Gladiators of Greece episode we did last year. Oh, and this time, oh my god. She joins me to share all the sweaty, oily, naked with a bow on details of the ancient Olympics and ancient Greek games broadly. And so today, to accompany that, I'm going to share with you one of the places where myth and athletic games collide. Lyric poetry. And sometimes Pausanias and his description of ancient Greece, which is the quote that I read at the top of the episode. See, in ancient Greece, two of the coolest things that you could be were poets and athletes. And there were a hell of a lot of poems written for athletes. But what is an athlete without a little help from the gods? Next week, the answers to your questions. But now, the very ancient and mythological and far more nude than they are now, Olympics. This is episode 268, Sing Muse of Gods and Wrestlers, Origins and Odes of the Ancient Olympics. Did you know there's a Greek dessert that is about 2,800 years old? The dessert itself is likely as old as the Mesopotamian period of ancient Iraq, but we know with certainty that the Greek form, which are now called loukoumades, and are tasty as shit, appeared at the first recorded date for the Olympics, 776 BCE. Little balls of fried dough coated with honey. Yes, please, highly recommend. Which leads me to, yes, the first recorded Olympics of ancient Greece were in 776 BCE. This is the very early Archaic Age, so pretty early in the grand scheme of Greek history. But I'm going to leave the history to Alexandra's episode that's coming this Friday, and instead we are going to just look at the mythology of it all. Surprise, surprise, I know. See, just like most wonderful things from ancient Greece, the Olympics have mythological origins. Like, how could they not? Unfortunately, there isn't much that survives in terms of any actual story of the Olympics founding, but we know the basics. Again, in large part because of the wonder that is Pausanias. Remember, Pausanias was the Greek travel writer of the Roman period. He traveled the Greek world and wrote down what he saw and heard from locals. We are eternally grateful to him for it, too, because it's through Pausanias that we learn about countless stories and sites which are otherwise completely lost, and we would have never known they existed, let alone what they looked like. And in the case of Pausanias' visit to Elis, where the city of ancient Olympia is located, it is through him that we get a sense of what things were like during his time, at least, and the stories and myths that were told by the locals. I'm going to read you just a little bit of slightly abridged Pausanias now, where he talks about the mythological founding of the Olympic Games, something that was believed to be older even than the humans of the Greek world. Older even than Zeus himself. The most learned antiquarians of Elis say that Kronos was the first king of heaven, and that in his honor a temple was built in Olympia by the men of that age, who were called the Golden Race. When Zeus was born, Rhea entrusted the guardianship of her son to the dactyloi of Ida. They came from Cretan Ida, Heracles, Pausanias, Epimenides, Iasios, and Idas. Heracles, being the eldest, matched his brothers as a game in a running race, and crowned the winner with a branch of wild olive, of which they had such copious supply that they slept on heaps of its leaves while still green. Heracles of Ida, therefore, has the reputation of being the first to have held, on the occasion I mentioned, the games, and to have called them Olympiacos. So he established the custom of holding them every 5th year, because he and his brothers were 5 in number. Now some say that Zeus wrestled here with Kronos himself for the throne, while others say that he held the games in honor of his victory over Kronos. The record of victors include Apollo, who outran Hermes and beat Ares at boxing. It is for this reason, they say, that the Pythian flute song is played while the competitors in the pentathlon are jumping. For the flute song is sacred to Apollo, and Apollo won Olympic victories. That's what Pausanias has to say about the founding of the Olympics, or the first founding. And yes, it features Heracles because, of course, it features Heracles. Everything does. He's being connected here with the dactyls, the dactyloi, also called the Curites, who are some of the deities said to have helped raise Zeus in secret on Mount Ida so that he could overthrow Kronos. But like so many things in myth, that's just a matter of needing to connect or wanting to connect the most important cultural characters, Heracles, Zeus, into one of the most culturally important events. If anyone was going to help found the Olympics, it was going to be Heracles. I won't pretend the story of it being this Heracles was the consensus, though, in the ancient world. 2 slightly earlier writers are a bit less certain. There's a bit of debate as to whether the Heracles of the dactyloi was the same Heracles of heroic Greek fame. But the story otherwise seems to remain pretty much the same. And honestly, it just sounds like so much fucking Heracles to me. You gotta slot him in everywhere. The point really is to establish the Olympic Games as being older than humanity, as being something invented by gods, where gods competed, and which is therefore one of the most sacred events in the ancient Greek world. Because like everything in that world, the Olympics were as much about honoring the gods as they were about competing athletically. That's why we have even stories of at least Apollo, Hermes, and Ares competing in the games. And heroes, too, were said to have competed in the games and founded different versions of the games as time goes on, but we'll look at those later. First, an ode. Pindar is one of the most famous lyric poets of ancient Greece. I don't talk about him all that often because, well, he wrote almost entirely odes to victors of athletic events, which makes him not the most interesting when it comes to relaying mythical stories, but particularly interesting when it comes to, well, athletic games. His work was often commissioned by the winners of these events. They wanted the famed Pindar to write an ode to them honoring their victory. He became super famous. He's still very famous. Fortunately for us, like I said, mythology is still inherently tied not only to the athletic games, Olympic and otherwise, but also to poetry itself. So we're still going to get some nice myth content in these odes to epic ancient athletes. Like this young man from Orchomenos, a city in Boeotia to the west of Thebes. The city had a particular connection with the goddesses called the Graces, or sometimes the Charities. These are 3 women who usually feature in myth as attendants to Aphrodite. They don't really have much in the way of stories around them, but they were worshipped more broadly too, like in Orchomenos. We think this kid, his name was Asopikos, won a race, and this song was written for him by Pindar, who's also from Orchomenos, to be sung by a chorus once he returned home. Asopikos' father, it seems, had died, and Pindar found a way of incorporating him into his son's victory song, even from his place in the underworld. It's really nice. And it's not too long, so I'm just going to read it all to you. O you who haunt the land of goodly steeds that drink of Kephisos' waters, lusty Orchomenos' queens renowned in song, O graces, guardians of the Miniai's ancient race, listen, for to you I pray. For by your gift come unto men all pleasant things and sweet, and the wisdom of a man and his beauty, and the splendor of his fame. Yes, even gods without the graces' aid rule never at feast or dance, but these have charge of all things done in heaven, and beside Pythian Apollo of the golden bow, they have set their thrones and worship the eternal majesty of the Olympian Father. O Lady Aglaia, and you, Euphrosyne, lover of song, children of the mightiest of the gods, listen and hear, and you, Thalia, delighting in sweet sounds, and look down upon this triumphal company, moving with light step under happy fate. In Lydian mood of melody concerning Asopikos am I come here to sing, for that through you, Aglaia, in the Olympic games the Miniai's home is winner. Fly, Echo, to Persephone's dark-walled home, and to his father bear the noble tidings, that seeing him you may speak to him of his son, saying that for his father's honor in Pisa's famous valley he has crowned his boyish hair with garlands from the glorious games. Beyond its origins before humanity even existed, the mythological history of the Olympics continues on through the generations. They account not only for the original invention during the Golden Age, this mythological time period before the race of humans that we know now, but also origins in the line of mortals and heroes that we know very well. The story goes that the Golden Age race was wiped out by the flood, so the Olympics needed to be founded again by the next race of humans. So here's some more Pausanias. Again, slightly abridged, so I'm not rambling too long, but let's be honest, it's all really interesting. Later on there came, they say, from Crete Clymenus, the son of Cardus, about 50 years after the flood came upon the Greeks in the time of Deucalion. He was descended from Heracles of Ida. He held the games at Olympia and set up an altar in honor of Heracles, his ancestor, and the other Curetes, giving to Heracles the surname of Peristates. And Endymion, the son of Aethlius, deposed Clymenus and set his sons a race in Olympia with the kingdom as the prize. And about a generation later than Endymion, Pelops held the games in honor of Olympian Zeus in a more splendid manner than any of his predecessors. When the sons of Pelops were scattered from Elis over all the rest of the Peloponnesus, Amathion, the son of Cretheus and cousin of Endymion on his father's side, for they say that Aethlius too was the son of Aeolus, though supposed to be a son of Zeus, held the Olympian games, and after him Peleus and Neleus in common. Augeas too held them, and likewise Heracles, the son of Amphitryon, after the conquest of Elis. The victors crowned by Heracles include Iolaus, who won with the mares of Heracles. So of old a competitor was permitted to compete with mares which were not his own. Homer, at any rate, in the games held in honor of Patroclus, has told how Menelaus drove a pair of which one was Aethra, a mare of Agamemnon, while the other was his own horse. Moreover, Iolaus used to be the charioteer to Heracles, so Iolaus won the chariot race, and Iaseus and Arcadian the horse race, while of the sons of Tyndareus one won the foot race, and Polydeuces the boxing match. Of Heracles himself it is said that he won victories at wrestling and the Pancration. So, down the generations, kings and heroes keep holding competitions in Olympia. Pausanias also gives an incredibly detailed historical account of the games, but frankly it's not something I want to go into detail, because it's just not that exciting, and I'm fairly certain Alexandra shared a ton of it, but in a really fun way, so we're just going to wait for her episode on Friday. We think of the Olympics now as, like, the most important athletic competition, I guess, in the world. Like, I feel like that's a valid thing, but again, I don't like sports, so, you know, if I'm wrong, ignore it. But in the ancient world, there were a number of competitions like the Olympics, held in different cities. Again, Alexandra goes into a lot of detail on this, and, like, which were which, and what was going on, and what it all meant to win one, multiple, all of them. But as Pausanias says, like, this tradition of competition is found as far back as Homer, too, you know, where the games are held at Patroclus' funeral as a way of honoring the fallen and the gods. Because again, these athletic games are just as much about honoring gods, people, culture, life, as they are about competing in a wrestling match. I haven't gone into detail on, you know, the events themselves, because that's something we're going to look at in detail on Friday, but a quick list would include things like wrestling and boxing, races of various lengths, chariot racing, and more. And yes, I've said it once, I'll say it again. Like, they did this all naked. There's also this wild little sport called Pancration, which basically means, like, all powerful, and which was kind of like MMA, only there were fewer rules. You couldn't bite people or gouge their eyes. Everything else was fair game. And again, you'd be naked. Save for a little accessory that I will leave for Alexander to share with you all, because when I say that conversation was the hardest I've ever laughed in the history of this podcast, like, I don't think I'd be lying. But for now, another ode. Theron was a tyrant leader of one of the many Greek colonies of southern Italy, Akragas, on Sicily, and in 476 BCE, he won a chariot race. This type of race wasn't one where the winner actually competed themselves. I think the chariots are the only competitions where this is the case. Instead, it's their charioteer and their chariot who did the work, but the man with all the money gets the credit. And also doesn't have to do anything dangerous. Unfortunately, the charioteers were also probably enslaved. It's not the best competition, but this is a lovely ode. And you know, men with power holding all the cards, something new and different for humanity. Through Pindar's ode, Theron traces his family line back to the royal house of Thebes, which you will not be surprised to hear is why I picked this one to read. He's looking at fortune, wealth, how these things intertwine. You'll remember the royal house of Thebes had an awful lot of bad luck in their family line, and yet their stories remained some of the most culturally important in all of Greek myth. This ode is longer than the first one I read, but it's really interesting to see how Pindar looks at the tragedies of the House of Thebes, like Cadmus's daughters, Oedipus and his children, and connects them with this man's story of victory. He looks at death, the achievements of heroes, and I'm just going to read it to you. Lords of the lute, my songs, what god, what hero, or what man are we to celebrate? Verily, of Zeus is Pisa the abode, of Heracles the Olympian feast was founded from the chief spoils of war, and Theron's name must we proclaim for his victory with the 4-horse car, a righteous and God-fearing host, the stay of Acragas, of famous sires the flower, a savior of the state. They, after long toils, bravely born, took by a river's side a sacred dwelling place, and became the eye of Sicily, and a life of good luck clave to them, bringing them wealth and honor to crown their inborn worth. O son of Cronos and of Rhea, lord of Olympus's seat, and of the chief of games, and of Alpheus's ford, for joy in these my songs guard ever graciously their native fields for their sons that shall come after them. Now of deeds done, whether they be right or wrong, not even time, the father of all, can undo the accomplishment. Yet with happy fortune forgetfulness may come. For by high delights an alien pain is quelled and dies, when the decree of God sends happiness to grow aloft and widely. And this word is true concerning Cadmus's fair-throned daughters, whose calamities were great, yet their sore grief fell before greater good. Amid the Olympians long-haired Semele still lies, albeit she perished in the thunderer's roar, and Pallas cherishes her ever, and Father Zeus exceedingly, and her son, the ivy-bearing god. And in the sea, too, they say that to Ino, among the sea-maids of Nereus, life incorruptible has been ordained for evermore. Yes, but to mortals the day of death is certain never, neither at what time we shall see in calm the end of one of the sun's children, the days, with good thereto unfailing, now this way and now that run currents, bringing joys or toils to men. Thus destiny, which from their fathers holds the happy fortune of this race, together with prosperity heaven sent, brings ever, at some other time, better reverse. From the day when Laius was slain by his destined son Oedipus, who met him on the road and made fulfillment of the oracle spoken of old at Pytho. Then swift Irenaeus, when she saw it, slew by each other's hand his warlike sons. Yet after that Polynices fell, Thersander lived after him, and won honor in the second strife, and in the fights of war, a savior scion to the Adrastid house. From him they have beginning of their race. Meet it is that Isidamos receive our hymn of triumph on the lyre, for at Olympia he himself received a prize, and at Pytho and at the Isthmus to his brother of no less a lot did kindred graces bring crowns for the 12 rounds of the 4-horse chariot race. Victory sets free the assayer from the struggle's griefs, yes, and the wealth that a noble nature has made glorious brings power for this and that, putting into the heart of man a deep and eager mood, a star far seen, a light wherein a man shall trust, if but the holder thereof knows the things that shall be, how that of all who die the guilty souls pay penalty. For all the sins sinned in this realm of Zeus, one judges under earth, pronouncing sentence by unloved constraint. But evenly ever in sunlight, night and day, an unlaborious life the good receive. Neither with violent hand vex they the earth nor the waters of the sea in that new world, but with the honored of the gods whosoever had pleasure in keeping of oaths, they possess a tearless life. But the other part suffer pain too dire to look upon. Then whosoever have been of good courage to the abiding steadfast thrice on either side of death, and have refrained their souls from all iniquity, travel the road of Zeus unto the tower of Cronos. There round the islands of the blessed the ocean breezes blow, and golden flowers are glowing, some from the land on trees of splendor, and some the water feeds, with wreaths whereof they entwine their hands. So orders Rhadamanthus' just decree, whom at his own right hand has ever the father Cronos, husband of Rhea, throned above all worlds. Peleus and Cadmus are counted of that company, and the mother of Achilles, when her prayer had moved the heart of Zeus, bore there her son, even him who overthrew Hector, Troy's unbending, invincible pillar, even him who gave Kychnos to death, and Memnon, the Ethiopian son of the morning. Many swift arrows have I beneath my bended arm, within my quiver, arrows that have a voice for the wise, but for the multitude they need interpreters. His art is true, who of his nature has knowledge. They who have but learnt, strong in the multitude of words, are but as crows that chatter vain things in strife against the divine bird of Zeus. Come, bend your bow on the mark, O my soul, at whom again are we to launch our shafts of honor from a friendly mind? At Acragas will I take aim, and will proclaim and swear it with a mind of truth, that for 100 years no city has brought forth a man of mind more prone to well-doing towards friends, or of more liberal mood than Theron. Yet praise is overtaken of distaste, wherewith is no justice, but from covetous men it comes, and is fain to babble against, and darken the good man's noble deeds. The sea sand none has numbered, and the joys that Theron has given to others, who shall declare the tale thereof? Kind of surprising to remember that that was all for a man who happened to sponsor the winning chariot in an Olympic race, right? The ancient Greeks didn't do anything halfway, and there is a good reason why so much of Pindar's work survives, even if I personally do wish we could, swap out a couple of athletic win poems for some surviving mythological content, but I guess we can't be picky. It wasn't just the usual Olympian gods who were honored and worshipped at the Olympic Games. There are, as always, a number of minor deities dedicated to specific concepts, which were also very important parts of the cult of worship surrounding the games and the sanctuary of Olympia broadly. Nike, of course, was an important one, goddess of victory, something pretty important at the games. But there's Ekakeria, too, goddess of truce. See, when the Olympic Games were being put on, the city-states of Greece all came together to peacefully, for the most part, I think, compete. And for once, they left their local squabbles and major wars at home. So Ekakeria, truce, was also very vital. And Agon was, we think, a god of contest, though he may have been kind of equivalent to Zelos, a god of rivalry. Either way, Pausanias tells us that alongside Asclepius, god of medicine, and Hygeia, his daughter, goddess of health, there was a dedication to Agon, contest, alongside Ares. But what about the ladies? As you will learn in Friday's absolutely wonderfully unhinged episode looking at the ancient Olympics, women were expressly forbidden from attending. They could not see the naked men wrestling each other. What would they think? Their sensibilities. Now, Alexandra has a truly incredible story of the lengths that they went to keep women away, but we will leave that for her to tell. Oh my god. There may have been no women at the Olympics themselves, only endlessly naked dudes, but women did have a games of their own. Was it anywhere near as widespread, celebrated, or sacred? No, of course not. They're women. But hey, it did exist. So let's see what the ladies were allowed to do. They were allowed to race. That's it. But there are a few details that we can look at in the racing. The games for women were named for Hera, the Heraean Games. The games, as I said, were only foot races, but they were separated into age groups. So, there was more than one, And of course, it was only for unmarried, childless women. Women don't like to run after they've had sex, you know. Fortunately for us, Pausanias was interested in the games in which women were allowed to compete. Thank you, Pausanias. And it gives us some details about how things went. Men competed naked. They did love to be naked. But women, of course, could not. So here's what Pausanias says happened during the Horion Games. They run in the following way. Their hair hangs down, a tunic reaches a little above the knee, and they bare the right shoulder as far as the breast. These two have the Olympic Stadium reserved for their games, but the course of the stadium is shortened for them by about 1/6 of its length. To the winning maidens they give crowns of olive and a portion of the cow sacrificed to Hera. They may also dedicate statues with their names inscribed upon them. Those who administer to the 16 are, like the presidents of the games, married women. Now, I know the bar is in the ground, but it's really nice to hear about women being able to compete in something like this. Or, it's just nice to have evidence that women were allowed to do stuff. You know, they had something that was by women and for women, which allowed them to accomplish something real and meaningful. Maybe even have a statue made of themselves to honor it. It wasn't just these races they had. I mean, it was, in terms of actual athletic competition, it was just these races. But they also had 2 choral dances, which would have been something the men had also. And Pausanias tells us that the women's games had their own mythological history, even if it's only one short paragraph. The games of the maidens, too, are traced back to ancient times. They say that, out of the gratitude to Hera for her marriage with Pelops, Hippodamia assembled the 16 women, and with them inaugurated the Horion Games. They relate, too, that a victory was won by Chloris, the only surviving daughter of the house of Amphion, though with her, they say, survived one of her brothers. The ladies' games are very anticlimactic. Probably shouldn't have left them for the end, but it's too late now. Nerds. Thank you so much for listening, as always. This was quite fun. I've been kind of vaguely meaning to look at the Olympics for a long time, but as I don't particularly care about modern sports, I kept putting it off. I should have known it would be a thrill, though. The men wrestled naked, after all. The same men much of the world likes to pretend were super duper hetero. But just wait until you hear my conversation with Alexandra. The Olympics and other athletic games in ancient Greece were truly delightfully unhinged. I've said naked, but there is more. I cannot wait for you to hear Friday's episode, truly. And remember, next week I will be answering your questions for the 2-part Q&A episode. I need to record in the next couple of days from the time this airs, so let's make the new deadline to submit your questions July 30th, essentially the day this comes out. So if you listen day of, get them in, otherwise wait for next time. But remember, you can always submit your questions for whatever is the next Q&A episode. I do them in January and usually July, but this year, August. mythsbaby.com/questions. I can't wait to see what you guys all want to know. Honestly, I really love these episodes. They always open up so many interesting thought experiments. I don't even know, but they're great. I'm slowly losing my mind. It's fine. And also, we have so many new fun things in the works, honestly. I will be revealing some exciting announcements and merch and ad-free options, and you'll see lots of stuff, mostly Euripides, so much Euripides, my man. August and September are going to be fun. Here's a 5-star review from one of you amazing listeners. Please leave me a review on Apple Podcasts. It makes a huge difference, and it gives me something nice to read on the show. This one comes from a user called I'm Not Real in the States. Genuinely love this. Fire emoji. I was looking around for Greek mythology podcasts because I wanted to learn more, and you provided the best one. She says everything I think, and as a fellow nerd, it's just so fun to hear someone else talking about it with my same mind, so that later I could yap about it to my friends. Love it. I also love the way Liv points out clear misogyny and wrong things in the funniest ways. It's such a joy to feel bored in the day and realize I can always put your voice in my headphones. I've been listening from all the way down and I think it's good. Absolutely love you, girl, and keep up the amazing work. Thank you. Honestly, like, these truly do mean the world to me. Like, I get them in an email. I think I get all of them. I don't know. I get an email every day that has sometimes reviews, sometimes not. And it's like my favorite thing to read them. And it really means a lot. So if you haven't and you can, I'd love it if you did. Spotify also has introduced a new comments feature, so feel free to let me know what you think of the episodes, but also please be nice because I'm a fragile human and I already had someone leave 5 comments complaining about the ads. And it's just like really hard to hear people hating on me for making a living off of a thing I work really fucking hard to give you for free. Okay, bitching over. Leave me a nice comment, maybe? Let's Talk About Myths, Baby is written and produced by me, Liv Albert. Michaela Smith is the Hermes to my Olympians, better known as the assistant producer. Select music in this episode was by Luke Chaos. The podcast is part of the iHeart Podcast Network. Listen on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. Help me continue bringing you the world of Greek mythology and the ancient Mediterranean by becoming a patron, where you'll get bonus episodes and more. I'm really bad at doing new ones, but I try, and there's like well over 100, I think, of old ones, so get in there. Support this free podcast. Visit patreon.com/mythsbaby or click the link in this episode's description. I am Liv and I love this shit, but like, why aren't the modern Olympics naked? It would make for a far more exciting competition if you ask me. As a Canadian though, actually the thought of hockey being played naked sounds both cold and dangerous. So like maybe only the Summer Olympics should return to their nude roots.